If I'm working 60 hours a week, why does my paycheck say I owe them $3? Marcus Bell paused mid-chew, his fork hovering just inches from his mouth. The slice of toast suddenly felt dry in his mouth, like it had turned to paper. He looked up, stunned not because the girl was loud or confrontational. In fact, she'd said it casually, almost like she was joking to herself. But the truth behind her words hit like a slap. He studied her more carefully now. Mid-20s, maybe younger. Petite frame wrapped in a diner apron 2 sizes too big. Her sneakers were worn to the soles, and her ponytail was barely holding itself together. The name tag pinned to her chest read, Lena, though the plastic was cracked, like it had lived through more shifts than it should have. She didn't even realize what she'd said. Marcus leaned back in the booth, his heart giving a slow, sinking thump. For a man who had built a company preaching dignity in every shift, the irony tasted worse than the coffee. It was supposed to be a quiet visit. No fanfare, no cameras, no press. Just Marcus disguised as Henry Tate. Flannel jacket zipped halfway, trucker cap pulled low, checking on the heart of his restaurant chain the only way he knew would reveal the truth. Anonymously, from the inside. He had chosen this diner random liar, so he thought. Sunrise number 17, tucked in a quiet corner of Columbus, Ohio. It looked normal enough on the outside. Same signage, same color-coded aprons, same laminated menus. But inside, something was off. He'd felt it the moment he walked in, like the walls were holding their breath. Now, he was sure. That single line from Lena, it unraveled everything. No one else heard it. No one reacted. The young man behind the register, clean haircut, pressed shirt, AirPods in one ear, kept tapping at the touchscreen like his fingers were too important to rest. The manager, a man named Travis Cole according to the welcome board, hadn't been seen once in the past 40 minutes. And Lena? She was moving nonstop, balancing 4 tables, grabbing ketchup bottles, clearing plates, all with the practiced rhythm of someone used to being overworked and underappreciated. Marcus turned his head slightly, watching her move to the next booth, smile tightly, refill coffee. Her motions were efficient, but there was no spark, no joy, only grit. He pushed his plate forward and cleared his throat as she passed again. "Excuse me, miss?" She stopped, tired eyes flickering with politeness. "Yes, sir? Did you mean what you said? About owing money on your paycheck?" She blinked, then hesitated. "It's just a joke, I guess." Her voice dipped. "Sort of. My last check was, well, after taxes, insurance, and miscellaneous corrections, it came out negative. I had to ask my mom for gas money, again." Marcus stared at her, struggling to keep his expression neutral. Miscellaneous corrections? That was not policy. Not even close. "Have you spoken to the manager about it?" She glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway that led to the back office. Her answer was a dry laugh. "He says, it's the system, or accounting, or whatever excuse works that day." I stopped asking. "Doesn't change anything." Then she gave a small shrug, like it was just the weather, and moved on to clean the booth next to his. Marcus sat still for a full minute. He wasn't just angry. He was ashamed. He had stood in boardrooms defending this company, sold it as a model of ethical operations and employee care, told investors proudly, "We build people first, profits second." But what Lena had just said offhandedly, unknowingly, was a crack in the foundation. If her story was true, it meant something in the chain was rotting. And not just from a bad manager. This was systemic. He watched as Lena reached into her apron and pulled out a small, battered notebook. She flipped it open on the hostess counter between runs columns of dates, hours worked, shifts covered, tips earned. All handwritten, all detailed. The kind of tracking someone does when they know the official system isn't on their side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She just kept a worn notebook quietly documenting every hour, every tip, every row. If that broke your heart even more than the paycheck line, give Lena a like. And tell us, where are you watching this from? Someone near you might be feeling the same quiet rage. That's when Marcus knew. This wasn't just one bad check. This was a symptom, a warning, the kind that didn't show up in spreadsheets or quarterly reports but lived in the margins of someone's notebook. He slid a business card from his walletone printed under a shell name, tied to a private inbox, and scribbled on the back, "Keep tracking. Don't share yet. Someone sees you. He folded it and tucked it under his untouched toast. As he stood to leave, the bell above the diner door gave a lazy chime. Outside, the sky had lightened just a little, but it was still gray. Still uncertain. Marcus paused at the threshold and looked back. Lena was wiping down a table, nodding politely to a grumbling customer. She didn't smile anymore, not even the polite kind, and somehow, that hurt more than anything. Back in the truck, Marcus gripped the wheel tight, jaw clenched. The logo on the diner's window reflected faintly in the glass. True Heart eats real food, real people. He muttered under his breath. Real people don't pay to work. And I didn't build this to become a lie. The engine turned over. He had seen enough. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He'd driven back to the company-owned condo just outside Columbus, tossed his jacket over the kitchen chair, and sat in the dark for over 2 hours, the coffee still on his breath, the words still in his ears. My paycheck says I owe them $3. It wasn't just a throwaway complaint. It was a red flag wrapped in exhaustion. And that notebook, Lena's battered, handwritten ledger, wasn't paranoia. It was evidence. He poured himself a glass of water and stared at the flickering street lamp outside. Something had shifted inside him. This wasn't just a broken policy. This was personal. By 5 a.m., he was parked 3 blocks from the diner again, still disguised as Henry Tate. The streets were quiet, a city waiting to stretch awake. He sipped gas station coffee and waited for the lights inside the diner to flicker on. They did. At 5:26, Lena arrived first, helmet in hand, stepping off a rusted red bicycle with a torn seat. She locked it behind the dumpster, then walked through the back employee door. Marcus watched her disappear inside, then picked up his phone. "Deborah," he said, voice low. "It's happening again." Her sigh on the other end was immediate. "What did you see?" "Not just favoritism, theft. She's got a notebook. She's writing it all down. I saw the tip system being handled by a couple of pretty boys while she ran the whole floor. I think they're rerouting tips through the POS. Who's the manager?" "Travis Cole." Pause. "Oh," Deborah said sharply. "He's still with us?" "Apparently promoted by Jeff Meltonone of the Old Investors. That tracks?" "Too well." "Deb," Marcus said, rubbing his temple. "It's deeper than I thought. This isn't an attitude problem. This is a structure problem. They've manipulated access. Some of these kids don't even have login rights. Tips are rerouted, hours clipped, even deductions labeled as miscellaneous corrections. I'm not imagining it. And Lenashi's not the only one. You're planning to blow this up. I'm planning to fix what should have never been broken." "Okay," she said, "but don't go in blind. Let me run a quiet trace on the POS system. I'll loop in Marrainternal security. If there's unauthorized rerouting, she'll find it." Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Good. And Deb?" "Yes? Get me the last 3 months of payroll discrepancies, quietly." "Done." He ended the call and leaned back, eyes locked on the window of the diner. The neon sign flickered on. True Heart eats breakfast served with pride. With pride. He shook his head. At 6:07, the staff started trickling in. Marcus waited until 6:42 to make his move. He walked in like yesterday, head low, hands in pockets. Same jacket. Same look of someone trying to forget a long road behind them. Lena glanced up as he took his seat. She smiled, faintly recognition, but still polite distance. He ordered coffee and oatmeal this time. As she poured, Marcus nodded at the register. "That kid yesterday, Ryan?" She gave a short chuckle. "Ryan's not really a server. Technically he is, but he doesn't run tables, mostly just takes payments." "How does that work?" Her hand paused briefly, then continued. "Only a few of us have POS access. You'd think it's based on seniority, but it's not. Travis assigns roles each week. Ryan always gets lead register. Always. What about you?" "I'm on the supplemental list. Means I can serve food, bus tables, roll silverware, but I can't enter payments. I'm not allowed to touch the screen." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" She lowered her voice, eyes flicking to the back hallway. "Because I'm not related to anyone." That stopped him. Lena set the pot down and leaned slightly closer. "Travis is the manager. Ryan's his nephew. Jason the other guy by the POS is Ryan's friend from school. They always work the same shifts. They always split tips digitally. I've had shifts where I made over $400 in sales but only saw $15 at the end. Marcus leaned back, digesting that. And you've never complained? I did. Once. Got dropped from next week's schedule. No reason. Just not needed. She smiled thinly. Now I just write it down. Every shift. Every dollar. Still have that notebook? She nodded, cautious. Don't lose it, Marcus said softly. It's going to matter. She studied him then. More than just a customer now. Like she sensed something was different. Are you someone? He smiled, but didn't answer. Let's just say I've seen a lot of diners. Before she could respond, Ryan appeared behind the counter, tossing a dish rag onto the POS screen like he owned the place. Lena, 2 refills at booth 5, he barked, not even looking at her. She turned. On it. Marcus watched the interaction closely. Power didn't always show up in titles. Sometimes, it showed up in who gave orders and who swallowed them. He paid in cash again, tipped generously, and left quietly. But this time, before walking out, he looked Ryan dead in the eyes. Don't lose that register, Marcus said, voice calm but pointed. One day, someone might start asking questions. Ryan laughed, oblivious. Yeah? You one of those secret shopper types? Marcus didn't answer. Outside, he opened his phone and texted Deborah, loop in Mara. Begin POS access audit. Focus on Sunrise number 17. Flag all transactions tagged under manual override. Then he added, tell Mara to dig deep. I want names, logins, timestamps, and start watching Ryan Cole. He looked up at the diner sign one more time. This wasn't just a bad location. It was a symptom of something bigger. And Marcus Bell had built this company with his bare hands. He wasn't about to watch it rot from the inside. The office was dark when Marcus arrived. Not the kind of darkness that comes from a lack of light, but the kind that settles when too many things have been hidden too long. The blinds were drawn, the thermostat set 2 degrees too low, and the air held the sterile scent of printer ink and neglected coffee grounds. He set his laptop bag on the polished wood table, took off his jacket, and flipped on the desk lamp. The glow caught the dust in the air particles floating silently, as if even the room itself had been holding its breath. He hadn't stepped into the Columbus regional office in months, but this morning, it felt urgent and personal. He logged into the executive terminal using his master key ID, a digital signature reserved for direct C-level access. No region heads, no regional managers, just him. The system chirped and welcomed him with a sterile, "Good morning, Mr. Bell." He ignored it. Within minutes, he was deep inside the system's back end, reviewing access logs from the Sunrise number 17 POS terminal. Deborah had already sent him a zip file titled, Lena, Proof, Logs, Zip. He opened it, scanned the spreadsheets. Her notes were clean, meticulous, laced with timestamps and internal references. Each tip rerouted, each override, every access attempt. What struck him most wasn't just the number sit, was the precision of the deception. Manual overrides that occurred seconds after credit card transactions. Tips split between assigned users, many of whom were never clocked in. Most of the rerouting was happening during slow, hour-surly morning, or late night just outside the windows where regional compliance teams usually checked. And always, the same pattern: Ryan Cole processing, Jason approving, and a third phantom account admin Henderson authorizing. Marcus leaned back, letting the hum of the HVAC fill the silence. It was no longer speculation. It was a machine. A quiet, daily theft built into the very backbone of a restaurant he had once sworn would serve with dignity. He pulled out his phone and called Mara. "Go ahead," her voice answered sharply, already alert. "How far are we in?" "I pulled logs from the past 90 days across 5 Sunrise locations. 4 of them are clean. But number 17? Her voice darkened. "It's a playground." "How much?" $9,137.22 in redirected tips. "That we can prove." Marcus exhaled slowly. "And we think it's just Ryan and Jason?" "No," she said. "The ghost admin account Henderson has level 5 access. That's not something a server can grant themselves. Only a store manager or someone with corporate-level override can do that." "Travis," Marcus said under his breath. "Or someone who authorized Travis." "I didn't." "I believe you." but it means the infection goes deeper. He stood, walking to the window and staring out over the lot below. A janitor wheeled a trash bin past a row of sedans. The world was waking up as if nothing was wrong. "How do you want to proceed?" Mara asked, quietly. "For now, don't confront. Just keep watching. I want every login, every override, every shift schedule from the last 6 months. Cross-reference with payroll. I want to know who's been paid, who's been cut, and who's been silenced. I'll expand the net. One more thing," Marcus added. "Lena." "Yes?" "Protect her. If anything looks like retaliation, even a schedule, change, I want to know first." "Understood." He hung up, heart heavy. This wasn't just a few bad apples. This was a culture rotone that had gone unchecked under layers of good branding and empty slogans. He thought back to the early days, when he was just Marcus, the night dishwasher in Detroit, dreaming of owning something real. The first diner he bought had 3 employees and a fryer older than Sinatra. He remembered mopping the floor at 2 a.m. while trying to figure out payroll by hand. He remembered what it meant to earn someone's trust through a shift, not a slogan. Back then, the promise was simple. No worker would ever feel invisible under his roof. And now, here he was, a man who wore suits to board meetings, but needed to wear a flannel to hear the truth. His phone buzzed. A text from Deborah. "You need to see this." He opened the attachment. It was a forwarded email from a junior accountant in payroll. Subject line, "Missing hours sunrise number 17 Q2 review." The body of the email noted several discrepancies between clock-in records and what was entered into the system entries manually adjusted, trimmed by minutes, sometimes full hours, all affecting non-family staff, all benefiting Travis's inner circle. He slammed the laptop shut. He had seen enough. That afternoon, he returned to sunrise number 17, but not as Henry Tate. He parked right outside the front door. No disguise, no jacket, just a charcoal gray suit, polished shoes, and a clipboard under one arm. Lena was inside, training a new hostess on how to work the table chart. Her eyes widened as she caught sight of him through the glass. Ryan looked up from the POS, blinked, then slowly straightened. Jason elbowed him, confused. A manager, Travis, emerged from the back hallway, still tucking in his shirt and laughing with a delivery guy. The laughter died the second Marcus stepped through the door. He walked past the booth slowly. His steps were deliberate. The click of his shoes on the tile was the only sound in the diner. Then he stopped at the counter, adjusted his cuffs, and met every eye in the room. "Good afternoon," he said, voice firm. "I won't take much of your time, but I will take back my restaurants." Lena stared, her mouth open slightly. The new hostess beside her froze, not understanding. Ryan shifted nervously behind the register, and Travis's face went pale as paper. Because he knew. Marcus looked at no one in particular when he spoke next. "There's a virus in this place. It doesn't show up on health inspections. It won't fail the fire marshal's test, but it kills from the inside. It rots trust. It silences the good. And worst of all, it makes people forget what dignity looks like." He held up the clipboard. On it, a single sheet with printed data, account names, and a note handwritten at the bottom. "This is where it ends." The room stayed silent. Tomorrow would bring audits, suspensions, and press releases. But today, right now, it began with a truth spoken aloud, and a waitress who finally knew she wasn't alone. The silence in sunrise number 17 lingered long after Marcus finished speaking. No one moved. No one dared to. Even the sizzling from the griddle in the kitchen seemed to dim, as if the diner itself were holding its breath. Travis's lips parted, but no words came out. Marcus didn't wait. He turned to the nearest booth, placed the clipboard down with a soft thud, and removed the single page on TOPA condensed report prepared by Mara just that morning. It listed every unauthorized manual override, every shift discrepancy, and every digital transaction rerouted over the past 90 days. At the bottom of the page were 3 names in bold: Travis Cole, Ryan Cole, and Jason Weller. He slid the page across the counter, letting it stop just inches from Travis's trembling hand. "I suggest you read it," Marcus said, "before corporate security finishes printing the rest." Travis's voice cracked. "Siri, I wasn't aware." "Save it," Marcus interrupted cold. "This isn't a conversation. It's a reckoning." Behind him, Lena was still frozen in place. Her hands clutched a receipt pad, her pen hovering midair. She looked like someone who had just seen the world tilt a few degrees and wasn't sure whether to cry or run. Marcus met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. Then he stepped aside as Mara entered. No uniform, no introduction, just a dark blazer, Idaho clipped to her belt, and a tablet in her hand. She moved swiftly, efficiently, and without hesitation. Her fingers danced across the screen as she activated live access to the diner's POS system. "System scan initialized," she said calmly. "Please do not attempt to access the terminal until we're finished." Ryan, who had edged backward behind the counter, looked pale now. "What is this? You can't just—" "I can," Mara said, "and I am." Marcus walked toward the register. "You thought no one noticed, that you could quietly skim from the people too tired to fight back. But you made one mistake." He turned his eyes on Lena. "You forgot that someone always sees." Lena's expression cracked. Her eyes welled, but she didn't blink. She stood taller. "I kept everything," she said softly. "Every tip, every shift. Every time they said the system was down or the numbers were wrong. It's all in my notebook." Marcus smiled faintly. "And it matches our audit exactly." Mara glanced up. 76 shifts, over $9,000 misappropriated, all signed off by Travis and Ryan. Travis finally found his voice. "I swear I didn't authorize." "You did," Mara replied. "The admin access came from your login, multiple times, including while you were off the floor, which suggests delegation or collusion." Jason tried to slip toward the back exit, but another internal security agent, previously unnoticed in the corner booth, stood up and blocked the path. "We'll be needing all three of you," he said. "Now." Marcus turned to the rest of the staff. "I know some of you saw what was happening, and maybe you were afraid. Maybe you thought if you kept your head down, you'd be spared. But let me make something clear. Good people don't get punished here. They get promoted. They get heard. And starting today, that begins with Lena." Every head in the diner turned to her. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The look on her face, half disbelief, half relief, said everything. Marcus continued. "A new policy is going into effect today. Transparent tip tracking, real-time logs, and public shift payout records posted in the staff lounge. No more miscellaneous deductions. No more invisible work." He paused. "If you serve with heart, you deserve to be treated with dignity. Not just when it's convenient. Every single shift." The room, once heavy with tension, began to stir. A few staff exchanged glances. A cook leaned out from the kitchen, nodding slowly. Even the hostess trainee, barely old enough to vote, looked up with cautious hope. Marcus took a breath and exhaled. He had stood in conference rooms with Fortune 500 execs and faced less pressure than this moment. But this was where it mattered. This was where the soul of his company either lived or died. And for the first time in months, it felt like it might actually breathe again. Later, as Travis, Ryan, and Jason were quietly escorted out by corporate security, Lena remained at her post. She offered coffee, wiped counters, and took orders just like she always had. Except now the weight was different. Now, the silence didn't feel like fear. It felt like space cleared for something honest to grow. Marcus stayed behind, sitting in a back booth with Mara, going over final documentation. But before leaving, he pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Lena. She opened it cautiously, then gasped. It was a letter formally offering her a new position. Regional Fairness Advisor, Midwest Division, full-time salary, healthcare, travel stipends, and most importantly, a seat at the table where decisions were made. "I'm not qualified," she whispered. "You are," Marcus replied, "because you never stopped telling the truth, even when no one listened." She blinked back tears and nodded. He stood. As he walked out the door, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time that day. The neon sign above the diner flickered once, then settled into a steady glow. "True Heart eats real food, real people." Marcus looked up at it and smiled, just a little. Maybe now, it was finally true. The following Monday, Lena stood outside the corporate headquarters of True Heart Eats in downtown Chicago, clutching her new employee badge like it might vanish if she blinked. The glass doors shimmered in the morning sun, and her reflection stared back. Blazer too new, Heels borrowed from her cousin, curls tamed into something semi-professional. She didn't feel ready. She didn't even feel real. But the badge said otherwise. Inside, the lobby smelled like citrus and polished wood. A receptionist with bright red glasses greeted her kindly and pointed toward the elevator bay. "Floor 17, she said. "They're expecting you." They were. Marcus himself met her at the elevator when it dinged open. "Good morning, Lena," he said, smiling warmly. "I figured I'd show you around myself." "You don't have to," she started, but he raised a hand. "I do. Because if I've learned anything in the last week, it's that the people who've been ignored the longest often have the most important things to teach." She followed him through a maze of glass walls and soft carpets, past rows of cubicles and focused employees tapping away on tablets. It was all so quiet, professional, controlled, a far cry from the sizzling chaos of Sunrise number 17. He led her into a small conference room where two others were waiting. Deborah Ruiz, his longtime ethics advisor, and Mara, the internal investigator who'd cracked open the Sunrise case. "Lena," Deborah said, standing, "it's an honor to meet you in person. What you did took courage." "I didn't do anything special," Lena said quickly. I wrote it down. I didn't want to forget." That's exactly why you're here," Mara said, sliding a folder across the table. "This is your first assignment." Lena blinked. "Already?" Marcus nodded. "You're going to help us audit 5 additional locations, ones with similar warning signs: high turnover, inconsistent payroll complaints, and POS access irregularities." Lena's eyes widened. "You want me to investigate?" "We want you to observe, talk to staff, eat the food, watch the floor, most of a listen, the way you did when no one else would. We'll handle the technical side. You'll handle the heartbeat." She opened the folder and scanned the list of cities: St. Louis, Grand Rapids, Indianapolis, Akron, Dayton. "Why me?" "Because you're not from corporate," Marcus said. "You're not another suit. And that makes you the most trustworthy person we've got." Lena looked down at the folder again, heart thudding. She still didn't feel qualified, but somehow, she believed him. Marcus stood and offered his hand. "Welcome to the fight, Lena." She shook it, slowly. "Thank you for seeing me." He smiled. "Thank you for refusing to disappear." The next week passed in a blur of travel, diner booths, interviews, and long hours spent truly listening to staff who'd long stopped expecting anyone to care. Lena found herself sitting beside fry cooks and busboys, shift leads and exhausted mothers on double shifts. She heard stories that echoed her own tips gone missing, schedules weaponized, promises broken with a smile. She filled notebooks with their words. In Grand Rapids, a dishwasher named Kayla handed her a crumpled piece of paper detailing how her last 2 weeks of overtime had vanished. In Akron, a line cook named Miguel pointed to a stack of unprocessed tip receipts hidden behind a fake drawer. In Dayton, a server named Bree cried as she explained how every time she complained, her hours were cut. Lena listened. She didn't argue. She didn't promise fixes. She simply wrote it all down. And each time she remembered Marcus's voice. The people who've been ignored the longest often have the most important things to teach. Back in Chicago, she handed her findings over to Mara, who smiled at her reports like they were gold. "You've just helped build the strongest ethics case this company has ever seen," Mara said. "These aren't complaints. They're patterns. We can prove it now." Marcus called her into his office the next morning. He was standing by the window, staring down at the city as if weighing every heartbeat in it. "You know," he said without turning, "we built this company on 3 words. Real food, real people." Lena nodded. "I've seen the posters." "Yeah, but somewhere along the way, we stopped meaning it." He turned toward her, face serious. "You reminded us why we started. You reminded me." She sat, unsure what to say. "I've decided something," he continued. "Something big." She waited. "We're going public with it," he said. "Not just the reforms. The story, Sunrise number 17, the stolen tips, the notebook, you." Her mouth fell open. "May? With your permission. Your name, your face, everything. No actors, no spin. Just the truth. We're going to run a national campaign, a message to every employee who ever thought they were invisible." Lena swallowed hard. What if it backfires? Then it backfires honestly, Marcus said. But I believe it won't, because you didn't write down complaints. You wrote down hope, and that's what people need right now. She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers traced the seam of her slacks. She thought of the old notebook, still in her backpack, pages smudged with coffee, bent at the corners, truth soaked into paper. Finally, she nodded. Okay, Marcus exhaled, deeply. Then let's tell the country what justice looks like in an apron. 2 months later, the first video aired. It opened with a shot of Lena refilling coffee. Real diner, real morning light, her voice narrating. I never thought anyone would read what I wrote, she said. I just knew I had to write it down. Because silence makes you disappear. And I didn't want to disappear. Then came clips of diners across the Midwest. Workers smiling, laughing, meeting managers who now greeted them by name. The new system, tip track transparent, scrolling in real time behind counters. In the final frame, Marcus and Lena stood together outside Sunrise number 17. And below them, the words, real food, real people, real justice. Phones rang, applications surged, press flooded in. But Lena? She kept traveling, kept listening, kept writing, because somewhere, she knew, another waitress was whispering to herself, why does my paycheck say -$3? And this time, someone would hear her. Winter came early that year. Snow began dusting the rooftops of Chicago before Thanksgiving, and Lena found herself on a red-eye to Denver, wrapped in a heavy coat that still smelled faintly of fryer grease. Her title was now official, Regional Fairness Advisor, Midwest, West Division. Her badge had changed. Her paychecks were real. But what hadn't changed, what never would, was the feeling she got when she stepped into another anonymous diner and felt the quiet weight of unfairness lingering in the air. This new location, Sunrise number 34, sat on the edge of a truck route in suburban Aurora, Colorado. From the outside, it looked the same as the others. Frosted windows, neon sign, a home of the best biscuits banner peeling slightly at the corners. But inside, it had its own rhythm, its own story, and, Lena could already tell, its own secrets. The manager was a woman this time, Gina Mahoney. Crisp ponytail, clipped tone, smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She offered Lena a firm handshake and an overly rehearsed welcome speech. We run a tight ship here, she said. I've been told this is a random quality review. Lena smiled politely. Not random, routine. Just here to observe. Listen, sit down with staff and get a sense of how the new systems are being used. Gina's smile twitched. Of course. We've been fully compliant since day one. Lena had heard that before. She took a seat near the back, ordered coffee and grits, and quietly watched the floor. It didn't take long to spot the patterns. The older server who worked the most tables but never touched the register. The young guy with slick hair who never left the POS. A nervous dishwasher whose eyes darted every time Gina passed. But what caught her attention most was a girl, maybe 19, with a patchwork apron and sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her name tag said Loose, and she moved like someone trying to outrun her own reflection. Fast, quiet, nearly invisibly. Lena waited until the shift slowed and caught Loose near the soda machine. Hi, she said gently. Can I ask you something? Loose blinked. Sure. Do you like working here? The girl hesitated. It's better than the last place. At least here I don't get yelled at. But, Loose glanced over her shoulder, lowered her voice. But I'm not sure the new system works. I get shifts, yeah. But tips? Still weird. Sometimes it says I earn $20, but I get 5. Other nights, it's nothing. Do you track it? She nodded and pulled out a crumpled notebook from her apron. Every shift. I used to work nights at a motel. I learned not to trust. We'll fix it later. Lena took the notebook carefully. The handwriting was small, rushed, but clear. She flipped through several pages, her stomach sinking with each inconsistent entry. Does anyone else see this? I told Gina once, Lou said. She said it was a software bug. But it's weird, my friend, Raj. He works the register a lot. He always says his tips match. Exactly. Lena's breath tightened. Has anyone else complained? Luce shook her head. People are scared. Hours get cut if you talk too much. Lena handed the notebook back. Would you be willing to sit down with someone from our audit team? Luce hesitated. Will Gina know? She won't know unless we decide action is needed. Right now, this is just listening. Then, yeah, I guess I'm tired of being quiet. Lena smiled. You're not the only one. That night, back at her hotel, Lena called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. That fast? She's got a notebook, almost identical to mine. I think we've got a new variant of the same scheme. Local or regional? Too early to tell. But it feels more subtle. They're keeping the numbers just clean enough not to trip flags. And Gina? Too polished, too confident. She knew I was coming. Probably coached everyone. But Luce didn't bite. And her data matches exactly what we've seen before shift misreporting, tip dilution, digital redirection. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then, it's happening again. Yeah, Lena said. Only this time, it's evolving. Let me get Mara on it. The next morning, Lena met with Mara's satellite agent on Satea, quiet woman named Elise with sharp eyes and a tablet always in hand. They went through Luce's notes line by line, cross-referencing tip logs, terminal logs, and payout receipts. The numbers didn't lie. Over the past 6 weeks, more than $3,200 in tips had vanished mostly from 2 servers, all rerouted digitally through manual adjustments made post-shift by the assistant manager, who happened to be Gina's younger brother. The pattern was familiar, but the execution had grown more sophisticated. Shorten a shift by 20 minutes here. Adjust an overtime clock in by 10 minutes there. Round down tips instead of removing them outright. Enough to stay off the radar, but not enough to be fair. By Friday, the case was airtight. Lena sat across from Luce in the break room and slid a copy of the audit summary toward her. The girl read it silently, then let out a long breath. I thought I was crazy, she said. You're not. What happens now? We're going to confront them. You don't have to be there unless you want to. Luce looked up, her voice small but certain. I want to. That afternoon, in front of the entire diner staff, Marcus joined Lena via live conference call as Elise presented the findings. Gina tried to dismiss them, blamed software, blamed miscommunication, even blamed Luce. But Lena stepped forward. She kept the truth, in her notebook, like I did, and it matched the data. Again. Silence. Then Luce spoke, quietly but firmly. I'm not invisible. Not anymore. The words rippled through the room. Gina was suspended. The assistant manager was terminated, and every staff member at Sunrise number 34 received full back pay for the stolen tips. As Lena walked out into the snowy evening, Luce followed her. Do you think this will ever stop happening? She asked. Lena paused, snowflakes landing gently on her coat. Maybe not everywhere, she said, but one place at a time. We make it harder for them to get away with it. Luce nodded, then smiled, really smiled for the first time since Lena met her. They parted at the parking lot. Lena looked up at the diner sign, glowing faintly through the falling snow. Real food, real people. And now, slowly, real justice was starting to follow. A month later, Lena sat at the edge of a long, gleaming boardroom table on the 22nd floor of True Heart Eats headquarters. The skyline of Chicago stretched wide behind her, but she barely noticed. Her notebook was open in front of her, the same one she'd used since the beginning. Pages nearly filled now with scribbled names, times, notes about POS systems, and words like withheld, discrepancy, and ignored. She wasn't here to report this time. She was here to decide. Around the table sat the company's executive ethics panel. Marcus at the head, his hands folded, his face steady but tight with anticipation. Deborah Ruiz was to his left, flipping through printed reports. On Lena's right sat Mara, tablet balanced on her knee, silent as always but alert. They were discussing Sunrise number 22 in Kansas City. The audit team had flagged it 2 weeks earlier. Patterns nearly identical to the Denver case had emerged: digital tip redirection, off-the-clock adjustments, favoritism embedded in the shift schedule. But this time, there was no Luce. No brave voice coming forward. Just numbers. Just silence. I flew in 3 days ago, Lena said. Her voice was calm, measured. I observed 6 shifts. I spoke to 7 employees off the record. 3 of them confirmed they don't understand how tips are calculated. One told me she hasn't seen a breakdown of her weekly tips in over a year. Deborah leaned forward. Did you get access to the manager's records? I did, Lena nodded. The numbers don't match. Tips entered by hand instead of flowing from the system. And strangely, the assistant manager, Derek Monrojas, had more POS access edits than any single staff member. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Derek Monroe. Wasn't he transferred from Sunrise number 11? He was, Mara confirmed. That location was never audited, but it's had similar complaints over the past year. Most were brushed off as individual disputes. They weren't disputes, Lena said quietly. They were warnings. There was a silence, thick and slow. Finally, Marcus spoke. What's your recommendation, Lena? She hesitated. This was different. Denver had Luce. Ohio had her. But here, in Kansas City, there was only suspicion, patterns, and the gut-deep knowledge that something wasn't right. But the voices on the floor were quiet. Not because they didn't know, but because they were tired. She looked around the room. We need to act. Not just internally, publicly. Deborah raised an eyebrow. You mean suspend the manager? I mean, Lena said, sitting up straighter. We launch a public pilot, the Fairness Hour. 1 designated hour per week, across every diner in the system, where tip data is live, displayed. Staff can ask questions. Numbers are broken down. It's not about calling anyone out. It's about transparency as culture, not just compliance. Silence again. Then Marcus smiled slowly. You just gave it a name. People fear numbers because they're hidden, Lena said. Let's stop hiding them. Deborah nodded. That could shift perception company-wide. It already has, Mara added. My team ran an internal survey across 10 diners. 91% of staff said they'd feel safer reporting misconduct if they saw corporate take public steps toward openness. Marcus looked at Lena again. This was your idea? She shook her head. It was my experience. And it belongs to all of them, the dishwashers, the closers, the kids rolling silverware at midnight. He leaned back in his chair. Then let's do it. The next day, Lena flew to Kansas City again, not undercover, not in silence, but as a face known to the staff now. Posters for the Fairness Hour had already been distributed. On Thursdays from 3 to 4 p.m., every tip entry would be explained. Staff could sit with a shift manager, ask how calculations were made, view their own weekly records, and even anonymously log any discrepancies. When Lena walked into Sunrise number 22, she felt it. The tension, the watching. She greeted each server, smiled at the cooks, ordered black coffee from a girl named Shannon who looked exhausted but curious. When 3 p.m. struck, the first 2 employees hesitated before walking to the back table where the screen had been set up. By 3:20, the room was full. By 3:40, one of the dishwashers raised his hand and pointed to a transaction. Why is this one missing from my sheet? The assistant manager stammered. It must be a system bug. But Lena stepped in. That's what they told me once too. Let's check the override logs. She walked them through it, line by line, slowly, clearly, and the dishwasher smiled. By the end of the hour, 5 employees had signed up for optional one-on-one sessions with HR. 2 had asked about Lena's notebook, and 1 asked if he could start his own. That night, Lena sat in a booth alone, watching the servers laugh as they cleaned up. A busboy passed her, paused, then said, Miss Lena? She looked up. Yes? My mom works at Sunrise number 8 in Missouri. She said she saw you on television, she said. You gave people like her a voice. Lena's throat tightened. Tell her she already had one. She just needed someone to hear it. He grinned and walked off. Later, as she packed her notebook away, Marcus called. How'd it go? He asked. It worked, she said simply. We'll expand it. She smiled to herself. I figured you would. He paused. You know, Lena, it's strange. What is? I used to think change came from the top. Budgets, metrics, strategy. And now? Now I think it starts with someone sitting at a booth, writing in a notebook, refusing to pretend the numbers don't matter. She didn't say anything, just looked down at the last page she'd written. Underneath the notes and timestamps, she had scribbled a quote in the margin. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it whispers through ink and shifts and shared coffee, but it never stays silent forever. and neither would she. Spring came late to Chicago that year. Wind still nipped at the city's edge, and people walked with collars upturned, as if winter refused to loosen its grip. But inside the 10th floor auditorium of True Heart Eats headquarters, something warmer was taking root. The room was full staff from over 20 branches seated side by side with regional managers, auditors, and even a few franchise owners who rarely stepped out from behind balance sheets. At the center sat a modest stage, and on that stage, Lena stood with a small wireless mic clipped to her lapel and a tattered notebook in her hand. She hadn't wanted to speak, but Marcus had asked, gently, the way he always did when it mattered. And now, here she was, heels grounded, palms steady, voice clear. "I never thought this notebook would leave my apron pocket," she began. "Back then, I just needed something to hold the facts, because everything else was slippery. Schedules changed without notice. Tips vanished, and no one ever explained why. The room held still. Even the HVAC seemed to go silent. I didn't think anyone would care, but someone did. And now today I want to say thank you to the people who decided listening wasn't optional anymore." She held up the notebook. "This isn't just paper. It's what happens when truth outlasts silence." Applause swelled, not polite, but genuine. Lena smiled, lowered the mic, and stepped off the stage as Mara came up beside her. "You did well," Mara whispered. "You didn't preach. You invited." "That's all I ever wanted to do," Lena said. "Just make space for someone else to speak." Behind them, Marcus took the stage. His message was brief, but firm. The Fairness Hour would now be expanded company-wide, mandatory across all 42 branches, monitored by independent auditors and reviewed quarterly. All future assistant manager promotions would require transparency training. And a new Hotline Anonymous external would go live that day. He ended with a single sentence that Lena had heard him use before, but never with this much weight. "Real people deserve real protection." As the auditorium cleared, several staff approached Lena, servers, dishwashers, even a regional manager from Detroit. They shook her hand, thanked her, asked for advice. One woman pressed a small envelope into Lena's hand and said, "For your next notebook." It was only later, back in her hotel room, that Lena opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter, handwritten in blue ink. "I'm not brave like you," it began. "But my daughter works at Sunrise No. 3 in Nashville. She's 17, and last month she told me she made more in tips than her paycheck said. I didn't believe her. I told her maybe she miscalculated. Then I saw your video. I cried. I told her she could write it down too. There was no name, just a line at the bottom. Thank you for waking me up before it was too late for her." Lena folded the letter carefully, slid it between the last 2 pages of her notebook, and stared out the window at the dark city below. That night, she couldn't sleep. The next morning, she flew to Nashville. She hadn't told anyone, not Marcus, not Mara. She just packed her carry-on, pulled on a windbreaker, and went. Sunrise No. 3 sat in a quiet strip mall between a thrift store and a pawn shop. It looked tired. Old signage, a cracked window sticker, faded parking lines. But when Lena stepped inside, she felt the buzz, half hope, half tension. She ordered a coffee, Saturday, near the back. Waited. The servers were young. Most couldn't have been older than 20. One girl, short with tight curls and thick glasses, looked especially nervous every time she punched something into the register. When Lena saw her retreat to the back corner of the kitchen with her phone and a small spiral-bound notebook, she knew. She waited until the girl returned with her check, then smiled gently. "Hi, I'm Lena." The girl blinked. From the video? "I am. And I think you have something important to say." She sat down with the girl. Name was Ava and learned that she'd been tracking her hours for 3 weeks. 3 times the tip payout didn't match her terminal activity. She hadn't told anyone. Not even her mom. Not until now. They sat for 30 minutes. At the end of it, Lena handed Ava a card with the ethics hotline and a QR code for submitting a formal claim. She also gave her something else, her old pen. "I used this when I wrote the first page in my notebook," Lena said. "It still works. So will you." Ava held it like it was made of gold. That night, Lena called Marcus from the hotel lobby. "You flew down alone?" he asked, amused but not surprised. "I followed a letter," she said. From a mother who didn't know how to believe her daughter until she saw us. He was quiet a moment. Do you know how rare this is, Lena? What you've built. I didn't build it, she replied. I just refused to stop writing. He laughed softly. We've decided something. Oh? There's going to be a new program. Annual recognition for integrity in the workplace. It'll be open to everyone, servers, managers, even franchise owners. We want to honor those who kept the lights on when no one was watching. She could already feel it. The notebooks multiplying, the voices rising, quietly, steadily. What's it going to be called? She asked. He hesitated just a beat, then said, The Lena Bell Award. She went still. You can't name it after me. Too late. Unanimous vote. Besides, he added, the first recipient will be a young girl in Nashville. Her name is Ava, and you're going to present it. Lena wiped her eyes, half laughing. I better buy a new dress. No, Marcus said. Wear whatever you wore the first time you told the truth. That's the only uniform this company really needs. Lena smiled, the city glowing outside her window. Then she opened her second notebook, clicked a new pen, and wrote, The truth multiplies. It does not retire. And justice isn't just a system. Sometimes, it's a girl with a notebook who won't back down. It was exactly 1 year to the day since Lena first wrote the words that changed her life. She knew because she had the notebook still dog-eared, coffee-stained, corners curling like brittle leaves. Page 1 was a shift at sunrise number 17, a 5-hour morning rush, 12 tables, and a tip line that had somehow vanished. The ink was faded now, but the feeling wasn't. She stood backstage in a modest auditorium in Indianapolis, clutching that very notebook like it was a compass. Outside, the room was full. Over 400 attendee servers, cooks, regional leads, ethics officers, family members, and among them, Ava, Luce, and even Kayla from Grand Rapids, all flown in for the first ever Lena Bell Award for workplace integrity. The event was part celebration, part reckoning. Marcus had insisted on calling it what it was, a tribute to quiet courage. And tonight, Lena was not just presenting the award. She was closing the ceremony. The crew gave her the cue. Lights dimmed. The MC finished his final remarks, and then the crowd hushed as Lena stepped onto the stage. No spotlight, no podium, just her, standing center stage in a dark blazer over jeans, with her original notebook in one hand and a wireless mic in the other. I didn't ask for any of this, she began, her voice steady. Not the title, not the recognition, not even the justice. What I asked for was a receipt, a fair share, a name on the schedule that didn't disappear. Soft laughter rolled through the room, and knowing. I started writing things down because I was tired of feeling erased. Not angry, not rebellious, just tired. And then one day, a man in a flannel jacket sat at table 6 and actually listened. She glanced toward Marcus, seated in the front row, his arms crossed, watching with quiet pride. And everything changed. She held up the notebook. But this wasn't the start. And it's not the finish. It's a mirror. It reflects every invisible person who ever chose to document instead of shout, to persist instead of quit. She turned, gesturing toward the large projection screen behind her. Photos began to flash, images of diner workers from all over the country. Staff meetings, fairness hours, notebooks opened on break room tables, tip tracking boards mounted behind pause terminals. A new culture, slowly taking shape. The hardest part of this journey, Lena said, was realizing how normal unfairness had become, how quietly it seeps into corners, how often it wears a smile. She paused. But the moment we name it, the moment we say, this isn't right, we crack something open, and that crack is where the light comes in. The room was silent. Many in the crowd leaned forward, not blinking, not even breathing. I've met dozens of people like me now, people who were told to be grateful for half of what they earned, who were told fairness was a privilege, not a right. And I've watched those same people reclaim their worth, one receipt at a time. She smiled then, a gentle, full smile that reached all the way to her eyes. So, if you're someone still afraid to speak up, let me say this. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be true. Write it down, hold it close. And when the time comes, hand it to someone who finally sees you. She stepped back. The applause began softly, then built wave after wave of clapping, whistling, a standing ovation that went on longer than she expected. She held the notebook to her chest and nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. After the event, Marcus found her outside on the patio, where string lights flickered gently in the spring air. "You stole the show," he said. "I didn't want to," she replied. "That's why you deserve to." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter on company letterhead, formally appointing her as the new vice president of workplace advocacy, the youngest in the company's history. Lena stared at it. "Are you sure?" "No," Marcus said, "but you are." She folded the letter carefully and slipped it next to the anonymous note from the Nashville mother in her notebook. That book was almost full now. She'd have to start a second one soon. "I don't want to stop visiting the diners," she said. "You won't have to," he replied. "We're building something new. A traveling field office. Ethics on wheels. You'll head it. A notebook on wheels. Really?" She laughed. "I like that." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you remember what you said the first time we talked?" "Probably something clumsy." "No," he said. "You said, 'I'm not asking for applause, just a reason to believe this isn't all there is.' That stuck with me." Lena looked out at the crowd filtering out below them, young servers with folded aprons, older cooks with calloused hands, franchise managers who now asked their staff how they were and actually waited for an answer. "This wasn't all there was," she said. "No," Marcus agreed. "This was just the beginning." They stood quietly for a moment. Then Lena opened her notebook to the last blank page and wrote, "Truth doesn't need permission. It just needs witnesses." She closed it gently and tucked it under her arm, feeling the weight of it one last time. The lights from the auditorium spilled across the patio like a warm current. A new staff member, barely old enough to rent a Karen, up to her, breathless, holding out a worn envelope. "My sister made me promise I'd give this to you," he said. "She's in Oregon, says you made her believe in fairness again." Lena accepted it with a smile. "Then tell her I believe in her, too." The boy beamed and ran off. She looked down at the envelope, at her name scrawled in blue ink, then back out at the night, and she whispered, not to anyone in particular, "No one is invisible. Not anymore." Then she turned and walked back inside, where the lights were still on, and the people were still waiting to be seen.